Okay. All addiction programs talk about stop enabling the addict, stop enabling the addict. What does that really mean? What does enabling really mean? And that's such a puzzle. I mean, is it giving them money? Is it cleaning up after them? Is it calling in for work for them? Is it providing them a space to live when they need one? What is enabling? So we're going to break down one little piece of that, and I'm going to pull up my cheat sheet for that. So hang on just a second. What we're going to talk about is how unhelpful help can stop your loved one's recovery. Unhelpful help. That's really interesting, isn't it? So there's two things in unhelpful help. Doing for someone what they can clearly do for themselves. That's number one. So if they can clearly do it for themselves, call into work, drive themselves somewhere, pick up groceries. Those are things they can clearly do for themselves. And that's something you have to decide. Of course, your 2-year-old cannot get breakfast for themselves, right? And hopefully your 2-year-old's not an addict. But if they can clearly do it for themselves, just like you doing homework for your 16-year-old, that's not a healthy relationship at that point. So the second one is do something for someone against their will. Now, this one goes back to robbing your addict of their dignity, making them or creating a situation where you really impose on them, take away their worth, their self-esteem, not letting them make choices. So doing something for someone against their will. Normally we do this because we believe it is the best option for them. And when we're talking about adults, as opposed to stopping a 2-year-old from running out into the street, when we're talking about adults, it's really hard to know what the best option is for them, because oftentimes we choose something for them that, one, doesn't let them face their own consequences, and two, may not be what they want. And I have a real quick example about this is my husband broke his case for his iPhone. And as you know, an iPhone is 2 sheets of glass, right? So I wanted him to buy a new case. I wanted him to do it right then. And I wanted to impose that on him to the point where I got angry with him for not getting on Amazon and buying his new case. When I stopped doing unhelpful help, he explained to me that this iPhone was dying, the battery was having problems, that the 2 sheets of glass where I couldn't see it were cracked around the edges. He'd already experienced water damage. There was no reason to push more money into this item that was already falling apart. So a case was not going to do it any good. But I was so set on what I was doing, I was willing to cause a fight over it. So I was doing something for someone against their will. Now, let's put this in context. If somebody is getting ready to do self-harm, then you probably need to step in. You do need to step in with self-harm. Other than that, are we offering to do something that they can do for themselves and enabling them to keep doing the addicted behavior that we don't want to see anymore, that we're tired of having in the household? Is it just easier to do it for them than to have the fight? That's a really interesting question. So if we are trying to keep the peace at all cost, if we are robbing them of the opportunity to be responsible for themselves, if we are robbing them of the opportunity to face their own outcomes, what are we robbing from ourselves? We are actually creating this addiction cycle. We are saying, okay, you're not sober enough, smart enough, bright enough, whatever enough to handle the situation, so I'm going to handle it for you. Who is that keeping safe? That's keeping us safe. That's keeping the loved one of the addict safe so that we can have a predictable, what we think is predictable and comfortable life. But is it really? That's the question you need to ask yourself when you're providing unhelpful help. Oftentimes we feel exhausted, we feel put upon, we feel overwhelmed, we feel like, ugh, now I'm parenting 3 people instead of the 2 that are actually the children. Unhelpful help keeps us stuck and keeps them stuck, and we're causing the problem. That's the interesting dynamic in the family dynamic with an addicted loved one, is often we are part of the problem and we choose not to see it. We would rather point our finger at the person that has the obvious issue rather than the people who are working through this process as it has always been. So if you think about it biblically, the prodigal son, and if you haven't read this, you can go look it up. The prodigal son insults his father, takes his fortune, goes away, lives a riotous life with expensive food and prostitutes and just in behaviors that really cause him issues. But he wakes up in a pig pen and realizes that he has caused his own problem. The righteous older brother, who has remained at home the whole time, continued to serve his father, do what was asked of him, comes to his father and says, hey, I didn't cause any problems and you're not rewarding me. What the older brother is not seeing is that he is causing problems by not rejoicing when the prodigal comes home, by not saying, hey, I understand you made a mistake and I'm going to practice forgiveness in disrespecting your father and the family. He is not seeing that at all. He is seeing that he's done everything right, that he's been the good one, and that he should be rewarded. Well, the prodigal is clear that there's a problem. So when you are doing unhelpful help, you are creating a situation to where you're in control. You're doing the right thing. Oftentimes we give off the vibe that we're better than that other person, that we know better, we know how to handle things better. Do we? Because we're enabling this situation. We are continuing to make it possible instead of drawing clear boundaries, instead of looking at the true hurt rather than the symptom, which is the addiction. We are actually part of the problem rather than part of the solution. I know that's really hard to hear, but that is often why we are not able to seek our own purpose, why we feel like we've given up our whole lives to care for this addicted loved one, which was never what was intended, and is also keeping that person sick because we're keeping ourselves sick by not looking at our unhelpful help, by not looking at the things that they can do for themselves and not doing that, and by also doing things against their will. That includes pouring out the alcohol, calling in sick, making sure that things are organized in a way that the family system can keep functioning even when bad behavior is happening. So as always, I appreciate you. Thank you for showing up. It is one person at a time that we are going to become healthy and loving and kind and compassionate with those who are hurting and with ourselves, because we're continuing to do this and put up with this poor behavior because we're not being compassionate and loving for ourselves. Thank you for watching. Be sure and subscribe, and I look forward to talking with you in our next video. Bye-bye.